Hello there. I'm Gerald Gangaram, Vice President at the Bill of Rights Institute. Today in our Honoring Service series, I'm joined by Amanda Krantz, the Vice President of Finance and Business Development at Kalogen. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So what exactly does Kalogen do? What kind of space are they in?
So Kalogen started out as a company that made cushions for people that use wheelchairs to avoid pressure injuries. And some of our earliest customers were veterans through the VA, which is pretty cool because prior to getting Medicare and insurance reimbursement, the VA was willing to be first to try a new technology to help veterans that were using wheelchairs. And so that's how we started. And then there was a retired general that was near where our headquarters is in Melbourne, Florida, that heard about what we were doing and said, hey, you know who else could really use your technology? Bomber pilots. So on long duration flights, they sit for a long time, and anybody that's familiar with the B-52 is a very old aircraft with a very old type cushion. And so that's where we started with the Air Force, is adapting our wheelchair cushion technology for B-52 pilots and aircrew.
So you went from wheelchairs to bombers. That's apparently a natural progression for a company to go through?
No, not natural at all. I feel like we kind of, one of my favorite quotes is, you create your own luck, through hard work and kind of creating the opportunity for luck to happen for you. So this is where our company was started by a founder and CEO who has a long history in the wheelchair space. So in high school, he created a nonprofit that provided wheelchairs for people that couldn't afford them, and then graduated and went on to work at SpaceX, met some other engineers there that also really wanted to make a difference. So that also is not normal to, a high schooler to create a nonprofit in the wheelchair space and then go to SpaceX and come back. And then for the Air Force opportunity, that kind of fell in our laps. And then there was like, I wonder if there's a lot of other places that we can use our technology. So we went to CES, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, back in January of 2022 was the first year we were there. And that's where we really learned there's a lot of different uses for our technology. So we're not really a wheelchair cushion company. We're a engineering, in-house manufacturing company that wants to solve problems for people, and that can be in a lot of different places. So we're really, at this point, we consider ourselves experts in seating and helping humans. And so Hyundai came to us and asked us if we could put our tech inside an automotive seat. So we've had a paid proof of concept that we did with them, also working in the commercial aviation space, looking at passenger seating. Anyone that's flown in a long haul flight knows that that's also very uncomfortable. So we're really looking at solving the problems of seating across all different domains.
I'm glad that you are, because there were some missions I had that we were in that small cockpit for over 10 hours with body armor and everything else, and it definitely can wear on you. So I'm glad someone's looking into that problem.
Cool.
And you obviously didn't just start off as the vice president of this company. You had another background before that, actually start off in the Air Force. You were an engineer in the Air Force?
I was an engineer in the Air Force. I was a 62E, so engineering acquisition officer. But also my path has been unconventional in a lot of ways. And even within acquisitions, I had an semi-unconventional path. I was an in-plant rep for Defense Contract Management Command. So I worked at Lockheed Martin Missiles and Space. So my first job was actually going to graduate school. I worked at NASA Goddard out in the DC area, and I got a master's degree in electrical engineering. And then from there, went out to Lockheed Martin Missiles and Space and was an in-plant acquisition rep.
And I'm going to have to come back to the NASA thing in a moment. Like that's a pretty big thing to drop right there for one of your first jobs. But when all that time that you spent in the Air Force, was there something specific from that career that really impacted your view on the roles and responsibilities for citizens?
That's a great question. There's a couple of different things. The two main ones that I think that I took away are, one, in the Air Force, because people change, regardless of what role you have, you move and take on a new job. So learning how to get in and quickly learn and figure out how to make an impact. If you can't get up to speed quickly and provide value, you're going to move on to your next job and never actually contribute anything. So I think in the Air Force, you really learn how to get up to speed quickly. The other thing I think that I learned was being able to have a strong opinion, make suggestions, but then not get stuck in consensus. So as I've been out in the commercial side, when everyone's debating a topic, sometimes there's analysis paralysis and who actually is the decision maker, and seeing in the military how there is a clear chain of command and someone gets to make the decision. So if you're in an organization where there is not that chain of command and no one to make the decision, I think I've brought that part of, okay, we've been talking about this for a while. Like, if there's no one that's going to make a decision, how about I'll make a decision? And I think that's really helped move things forward.
That's a really key point in terms of even debating amongst ourselves is a very vital skill that I'm glad that we have more and more teachers and students that want to engage in those debates early on, where you actually can have difference of opinions, debate different ideas how to do this, but at some point you do need to pick something and then go forward with it. And then, yes, you can adjust accordingly. But I think it is something that we kind of have to see, and during the planning portion of the military, as well as when we actually have to execute those missions. So I'm glad that you highlighted that. Now, again, I can't leave this NASA thing just hanging over there. We actually have a whole curriculum on Neil Armstrong and the moon landing, and obviously all the Apollo missions. And it's something that always strikes me, because you have, again, over 400,000 people engaging in an effort to achieve this one goal. And you have people that we all know the story about Kennedy going over there, and it doesn't matter what level you were at, the mission for everyone was unified in, we're going to the moon. Yeah. And Neil Armstrong was quoted as saying that we're going to the moon because it's the nature of the human being to face challenges. Mm-hmm. And it's in our deep inner soul to do so. And it captures really that race being the curiosity and courage that led humans to stretch the limits of technology and trying to land on the moon. And you had that as one of your first jobs when you got into the Air Force. What exactly were you doing, and how did you see yourself in that NASA mission?
Well, it was a dream. I mean, one of the reasons I went to the Air Force Academy was I wanted to become a pilot and a test pilot and an astronaut. Life took a different course, but I majored in electrical engineering because I thought that was a great path, again, to becoming an astronaut. And I think another thing about the Air Force for me, which I was lucky enough to take advantage of, is the opportunity to get scholarships. So if you work hard and do well in anything you do, different doors open. And so I was able to get one of several different graduate scholarships. And so I was going to school. I was only working part-time at NASA while going to get my master's degree at George Washington University at night. And so when I showed up, the first job they gave me was to write test plans for the International Space Station. So that was kind of a defining moment in my life where this is easy to kind of age yourself when you tie it to the different eras of our space exploration. But when I was in elementary school, the Challenger had blown up, and so I knew that there was risk in space. And so when they gave me this role to write test plans, the first thought I had was, wow, I'm really good at test taking, but I don't know if I'm a great engineer, and I don't know if I want to be responsible for anything that can risk somebody's life. So I think that's also an important lesson, is knowing what you're good at and what you're not, and being willing to raise your hand and say, I could do that, but I might be better utilized somewhere else. So I ended up making the first website for the Shuttle Small Payloads Division. It was back when they're like, hey, there's this new thing called websites. And they didn't have a website. So I ended up teaching myself how to create websites. And I made a website. And then I also helped in their prep for the inside, when the space shuttle cargo bay opens, there's those little canisters. And so there's scientists that have worked their whole career, decades, preparing to put their experiments up in space. And that, you talk about the wonder and just the passion and excitement people have in space exploration. It was pretty cool just to get to be a part of that. I went down to Florida when they were preparing for one of the missions while I was working there. And my job there, again, when you're younger, I wasn't doing anything that greatly moved the needle, but I did get to be a part of it. So I got to dress up in the clean room suit and go in and actually write down. It looks like a giant jungle gym where all the canisters are attached. So my job was to go wipe it down and get it ready for the things to go up in space. But then during the mission, just being in the room when people were able to see their experiments up there, it was a reminder how much work is not just how you get a paycheck, but if you can be lucky enough to pick something that excites you that much, then it never actually feels like work.
Oh, amazing. And that's a common theme that we hear a lot of people joining us in these interviews talking about, is just find something you love to do and have someone pay you to do it, especially if it can be service related.
Totally.
But there's something that struck me with this journey that you've had, which is, 15-year-old Amanda thought one way that the trajectory of her career was going to go, and especially as at the Air Force Academy, decisions you're making didn't quite get there. But did you feel like you were a failure? When did you feel like you were successful in what you were doing? How was that journey for you?
I'm pretty lucky that I did not feel like a failure because I chose to give up my pilot slot, which people might think I'm completely crazy. But that's a really long story. But it was during the Clinton administration where they had cut down the number of pilot slots that were available, and people were deploying nonstop. And there were a whole long list of people that wanted to fly that couldn't. And so when I decided that I wanted to pursue more entrepreneurial avenues, my job out at Lockheed Martin Missiles and Space was in Silicon Valley at the height of like the first eventually .com bust. But being around that energy and building new things at a really tight timeline and seeing the results faster, for me personally, was something I was really drawn to. And there were so many people that wanted to fly that couldn't. So I was able to actually turn in my opportunity to fly and give it to somebody else. And I feel pretty good about that because one of my friends from the academy who didn't get a pilot slot originally, I don't know if he directly got mine, but he ended up going from being a navigator to an F-16 pilot and now a retired one-star general. So they ended up having an amazing career aviator and officer that got to fly because someone like me chose not to. So
the ripple effects of the choices we have can be tremendous in things. And so it's glad that you can have that connection there. But we predominantly service teachers and their students and these young adults that are thinking about what they're going to do. Not everyone's going to get the opportunity, or it makes sense for their journey to raise their hand and swear that oath of office like we did. Mm-hmm. How would you encourage young people to serve and strengthen their communities?
That is also a great question. I've had a lot of those conversations lately with a variety of teenagers that live around me, and there are lots of different ways to serve. Everything from helping with the local, we have a lot of trails where I live. I'm in Oregon. And so being a part of the Oregon Trail Alliance and helping make trails better, like that's a way to serve. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the military or mentoring other younger kids. Even getting a job, working at our local ice rink. And then there were kids that were really afraid to skate, and being able to actually not just be there and get paid to do a job, but to look beyond what you're being tasked to do and see how you can help. And so to me, that's service in every even small act. And so if you can make a difference in someone's life and make them be able to have an opportunity to get out and experience something, in my mind, that's also a way to serve. So
Is there a moment that you realized that service needed to be part of your story?
I would say I came to that much later. So I did not grow up where service was a part of my family. And so I think that is actually something that's important, even if you didn't grow up being a part of that. I went to the Air Force Academy because I wanted to experience the world differently. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio with a family that did not travel, and I just wanted more. I knew there was something greater, and honestly didn't choose it for the service aspect. But the more I learned about it, the more it became a part of something that became really important to me. And even in my entrepreneurial journey, one of my startups was a software tool called Doge, which is a phonetic spelling for thank you in another language, which that's another long story about how you pick naming. Nobody can actually pronounce it or spell it, but we rolled it out at UCSF, Benioff Children's Hospital in San Francisco, at Kaiser, at University of Michigan. And there were a lot of different organizations that were super excited about it because It was a way to make it easy for patients and other caregivers to thank the nurses and the different staff that help you when you're in the hospital and you don't get an opportunity to thank them. And so I think through my military service and as my interest in serving in different ways grew over time, that opportunity to realize even just saying thank you is a form of service to others who have serving us, that it's not just about appreciating them, it's also how you feel when you serve or when you express gratitude, that it's as much for what you do for others as what you're also doing for yourself, which might sound like it's counter to what service should be about, but I think the more it's reinforcing in what it does for you, the more I think people want to do more of it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it kind of gives, you highlight a couple things there, especially when it's never too late to answer that calling for whatever service means for you in your heart. And I think that's very important, let alone that, I believe the majority of people that are mentors and otherwise do things for people around them, they all find out that it's not a one-way relationship ever. It's not just a giving. There is something that the mentor themselves gives besides that they gain besides just enhancing the life of their mentee. So I really can appreciate that. Amanda, I know your time is so valuable. I thank you for spending it with us. I'm going to give you the moment. Is there any last thing that you'd like to impart on our teachers and students?
I've just been thinking a lot lately with everything that's going on in the world, and having just come back we had a conference for commercial aircraft interior show that was in Hamburg, Germany. And it was just really interesting to be in a country that went through what they did leading up to World War II and then coming out of it, and having conversations with Uber drivers there asking me about what I thought was happening in the US right now. That I think what I'm seeing back here is people can go one of three directions, either really angry and just complaining about it, or angry or supportive and getting involved, or just putting their head in the sand and not wanting to deal with it. So I think now more than ever, I think it's important for people to stay engaged and try to have healthy dialogue and see if we can get back to, like you said, having disagreements, but do it from a place of trying to understand where someone else is coming from, but don't give up and just assume that our path is set. Try to stay involved, and now more than ever, I guess, find a way to help in whatever way makes sense to you.
Absolutely. We need leaders of character now more than ever to continue to fight the good fight, whatever that fight might be, whether it's local or at the national level. At someday, one of those students seeing this hopefully can be sparked to see what the future is going to lie for us. Amanda, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you having me.